on to the Metro Inner Assessment Panel for Wednesday, the 18th of March. Declare the meeting open at 9:43. Apologies for the late start to those online. We've just been getting the attendees together. I acknowledge in opening the meeting that we are hosting this on the traditional land of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation. We acknowledge the Aboriginal people as the traditional custodians of Western Australia and pay respects to elders past and present and the ongoing connection between people, land, waters and community. The meeting will be run in accordance with the DAP Standing Orders and DAP's Regulations 2011. The meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the DAP website. Panel members may refer to technical devices throughout the meeting to assist them in considering the information before them. I'll now introduce the panel members for today's meeting. My name is Karen Hyde. I am the presiding member today. To my left, Francesca Lafante, Deputy Presiding Member. Further to my left, Tony Arias, Specialist Member. Then Councillor Kathy Lees for Part B, City of South Perth, and Councillor Bronwyn Moore, Part B, City of South Perth. We have no apologies today. Noting of minutes, the panel notes that minutes of previous meetings are available on the DAP website. We move to Part B of our agenda for the City of South Perth. First, I will seek declarations of due consideration. Panel members need to have considered all the documentation contained within Part B of the agenda and Part B related information. Could I please confirm by a show of hands that members have duly considered all that information? Thank you, that's unanimous. Next, I will seek a disclosures of interest. Could I please check with our local government DAP members whether this application has been before you at a briefing or a meeting? No, thank you. Are there any other declarations from panel members? No? Okay, thank you. We will move ahead then to item 3, which is the Form 1 DAP application. We have none. Item 4, Form 2 DAP application. And we have one today. Item 4.1 for lots 1 and 2, numbers 13 and 13A, Stone Street, South Perth, for 8 multiple dwellings, amendments to approved development plans. We have one presentation today from Tom Hockley from Aladdin Associates in support of the application, and you're here in person. Tom, I've allowed you 3 minutes. Please draw our attention to the key points, and then panel members will ask you questions afterwards. Thank you. When you're ready.
Thank you, President Member. Thank you, members and councillors, for the time today. Apologies for the mix-up this morning. Look, I'll just run through. I'll keep it brief. It was positive to note the supportive officer recommendation for the changes, and also the supportive feedback from the DRP was received through the chair review. There were no submissions received, which was also a positive outcome in relation to this particular proposal. So overall, look, the changes are minor and didn't substantially alter the form of the approved development. They're largely necessitated by the advice received during the detailed design stage from engineering and various technical experts. The structural engineering reinforcements through the building core, you would have noted there was some increases to wall sizes and wall alignments, which resulted in some external changes, including probably most significantly a bit of restructuring of the communal space at the podium level. Probably the change though that triggered planning assessment in this case was the fire engineering advice in relation to the stair core. We looked at, with the architect, we looked at a number of options with the fire engineering experts, which included opening the stair core, reducing the core to a single stair rather than the scissor stair that's proposed. But in the end, I suppose the functional outcome that was arrived at was to add on the pressurisation, the little section of pressurisation along the eastern side of the stair core, which has resulted in a minor 1.6 extension to that southern elevation on the southern side of the building. And I think overall, the amendment, when we looked at it, it didn't reduce the lot boundary setback to the east, to the southern property, sorry. We felt that it didn't further, I suppose, impact on views of significance or otherwise increase building bulk or residential amenity as a result. So in summary, the proposal as we saw it remains consistent with the objectives of the South Perth Activity Centre Plan and the residential design codes. It's capable of approval. I noticed that there was a Regulation 13 query that came through yesterday in relation to Condition 3. I've reviewed that and have no objection to those changes that have been proposed. So with that, happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. I'll invite panel members to ask questions now of our elected members. Councillor Lees, any questions? Councillor Wall, any questions? Member Arias?
So just very briefly, you referred to the boundary setback from the south.
Yeah.
You just confirm there's no alteration to that setback?
No.
Okay, no, thank you.
Consistent.
Thank you very much. Member Lafanti, any questions?
Yes, I have one question. It relates to the additional material that's provided by the office.
Yes.
It refers to plans, waste plans, traffic plans, acoustic and environmental. The landscape plan by Plan E, dated 16/12/2025, is that forming part of your determination you're seeking from us today?
No, well, the landscape plans were formed part of the development application plan package that was submitted. So, I mean, I was comfortable that the first dot point of the draft Condition 3, I suppose, covered off on that. But if you wanted to be, if you prefer to be specific about the landscape plan set in the list of dot points, I'm happy to. I'd be comfortable for that to be added as a dot point. Yeah, if that assists. Yeah.
That's my question.
Thank you very much. I have no questions, so we'll let you go, Tom.
Thank
And at this point, we will invite the officers of the city to join us. We have Scott Van Erland and Fiona Mullen. With you, this one. Thank you. Scott, Fiona, on the basis of what you've just heard, did you want to make any opening comments? Obviously, we've all read the RAR thoroughly. So did you have any opening comments or did you want to go straight to questions?
We're happy to go straight to questions.
All right, thank you. Go back round the table again then. Councillor Ward, any questions? Councillor Lees?
Yes, can you just clarify the landscaping plan situation?
Thank you through the chair. It is actually how the applicants described. The landscape plans were considered as part of the development application process. So the city considers they were encapsulated within that development plan condition. However, again, like the applicants, the city would be comfortable with the condition that's specifically referenced.
So they're already approved as
If I may build on that as well, the development plans that are found at attachment 2 also contain the landscaping plans back of that package. So should the DAP approve that today, we'd indicate that the landscaping plans have received approval of the DAP in relation to the amended development application before.
Okay, thank you. Member Arias, any questions?
Just probably a confirmation. In reviewing the applicant's submission and the RAR, it doesn't appear as if there's the changes don't affect bulk and scale, inclusion or bridge. Can you just confirm that?
Yes, again through chair, that is correct. The city's assessment of the application notes a minor extension of the southern wall to facilitate the fire stair and the pressurisation chamber as referenced by the applicant. The city's assessment has determined that there is a negligible impact to the built form and bulk built form and scale relative to the original approval.
Thank you. Sorry,
Thank you. Member Lafanti?
nothing from me.
Nothing from me either. So that was a quick and easy one. Thank you very much. All right, we now continue with our agenda, and we have before us a responsible authority recommendation that we accept this application as a Form 2 and that we approve. It is suggesting that there are no amendments. However, we do have an R13 suggesting something, but in the first instance, let's get this motion on the table and then we can take amendments as we see fit. So is there a mover, please, for that as the primary motion? Member Lafante moves. Is there a seconder, please? Councillor Ward seconds. Thank you. Member Lafante, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you. I'm satisfied that this proposed amendment falls within the scope of a Form 2 application. The changes are very minor in my perspective and reflect various constructional access and safety provisions associated with bringing this development to fruition. I would at this juncture like to move an amendment.
Yes.
It is Amendment 1.
Yes.
It is a modification of Condition 3.
Yes.
And it is relating to clearly identifying the approved, which set of plans we are dealing with as part of this consideration.
Yes.
And I'm proposing the words that were provided in the R13, which is the development shall be carried out in accordance with the approved plans listed below. And where there is any inconsistency between the approved plans and the conditions of this approval, the condition, this condition shall prevail. And so basically the plans are the development plan dated 14th of November 2025, prepared by Geo Mark, the waste management plan prepared by Alderling Associates in January of 25, the traffic impact statement prepared by Shawmack in January 25, the acoustic report by Hearshot, again dated December 2014, and the environmental sustainable design report prepared by Emma Jen for February 2025. I'm not moving anything with the landscape plan. I'm satisfied with the material that's been provided.
Thank you. So that's moved by Member Lafante. Is there a seconder for that amendment, please? Councillor Lees seconds. Thank you. Did you want to talk to your amendment?
I've already indicated that it is to provide clarity for the decision that's being made and the associated plans and reference that form part of these building modifications.
Thank you. Member Councillor Lees, did you wish to speak to the amendment? Okay. Any other speakers on this amendment? Let's put the amendment to the vote. Those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. Still with you, Member Lafante, on the substantive.
I have nothing further to add.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ward, seconder to this motion.
Yes, thank you. So the application, as we know, is an amendment to an already approved proposal for 8 multiple dwellings within a 9-storey building. And having reviewed all of the material, it's quite clear that the majority of the proposed changes are driven, as the applicant said, by a detailed design resolution, particularly in relation to the fire engineering, structural requirements and internal layout adjustments. And these are the kinds of refinements that we would ordinarily expect as a project progresses towards construction. Importantly, I note that the officer's report makes it clear that the amendments do not materially alter the built form, nor do they introduce any new impacts in terms of amenity, bulk or views of significance. And that position is also reinforced by the design review panel, which obviously confirmed that the development continues to achieve a high design excellence outcome. I do want to just very briefly address the issue of the setbacks, and I do note that the variation is relatively modest, but it does represent a further exercise of discretion beyond what was already previously approved. And so as decision makers, I'm aware that we always need to remain mindful of the cumulative effect of variations and the precedent that that might set within an activity centre. But having said that, in this instance, I'm still satisfied that the justification provided, particularly the integration of the additional building elements into the overall design and the absence of any demonstrable additional impact, supports the exercise of discretion in this case. I also note that there were no public submissions received, which I think is a relevant consideration in assessing the community impact. So In conclusion, really, I'm satisfied that the proposal remains consistent with the intent of the planning framework, including the activity centre plan and the local planning scheme number 7. And so I support the officer's recommendation for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Ward. Councillor Lees, did you wish to speak on the substantive motion?
Yes, thank you. So I agree with the city's assessment that the proposed modifications are minor and reasonable changes to the approved development. Essentially, they are to resolve the detailed design issues. The small increase in the wall length does not notably increase the impact of the previously approved built form, and it sits comfortably within the scope and intent of the original design. The absence of any objections for me further indicates that the amendment is not perceived as generating additional amenity concerns. So the proposal remains consistent with the earlier approval and aligns with the relevant planning framework. Given the limited extent of the change and its clear integration into the approved design with no significant amenity impacts, I'm happy to support the proposal.
Thank you, councillor. Member Arias, did you wish to speak to the substantive?
Thank you, presiding member. I support the comments already made by previous members, so I won't repeat those, but in my mind, the proposed amendments are minor. They are appropriate to be considered as a Form 2 matter. They don't have any impact in terms of bulk or scale or in fact amenities. So on that basis, happy to support the motion to approve.
Thank you, Member Arias. I'll just speak briefly. I concur. It's been very well articulated by previous members why this should be supported. I too support, and I'm satisfied that it is a Form 2 with minor modifications, still achieving the design excellence for Tier 1. And I don't see any significant impact from these small modifications, and I think they are proportionate to development scale and inevitable as design develops through that technical assessment stage with different building code requirements, etc. So I'm very happy to support this in accordance with the recommendation of the RAR and as we have amended. That being said, I'll return to the mover, Member Lafante, to have the right to reply, close debate.
Nothing further.
Thank you. Let's put this item to the vote then as amended. Those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. That draws that to a close. You're welcome to stay or welcome to go, whichever you choose. Thank you. We will now move to our second item, which is a Section 31 SAT reconsideration for Lot 46, number 142 Coote Street, South Perth, proposed 3-storey medical centre dental practice. We have 2 presenters on this item today, both from the applicant team and both in support of the application. We have Peter Damon and Trent Durward. Thank you. Have PowerPoints, no.
Keep it simple.
Thank you.
We sit video okay?
Am I right in thinking we've also got Dr. Kent Tan online or not this morning?
Yes, I don't know for sure, but he was going to jump on.
No, he's not online this morning. We've confirmed that. So you have been limited to 3 minutes each. You draw our attention to the key points. I'll let you know when you're close to time, and then we'll open for questions. So when you're ready.
So I'll start, Peter Damon. I'll sort of prepare notes to help give us the time, but I conducted the independent traffic and parking assessments on behalf of the applicant, and the city has raised some questions in relation to that in the RAR, and I guess wish to respond in order to provide some context for the panel. Of course, the city welcome to raise questions, but we do need to understand what's being asked for here, and there's some suggestion that the approach taken should have been different. Well, in fact, I just want to clarify that you don't apply employee growth numbers to floor area estimates. And so I just want to clarify, we took a highly conservative approach to our assessment. We did that to show that even when significantly overestimating the numbers, the traffic impacts were still relatively minor. So we decided to adopt the approach using the WAPC guidelines from 2016, which bases traffic generation and parking demand on floor areas. But if the traffic generation was based on employee numbers, which rather than floor areas, which we've now done that as suggested by the city's officers, then the trip and parking generation would have been assessed as being much lower than we reported, less than half, in fact. So instead of 80 to 91 combined in and out trips per hour to this site, the number of estimated trips would have significantly reduced down to between 31 and 45. This much lower estimate is based on the current proposal being put forward for 45 employees. So our professional assessment is that the traffic impact from the development will be considerably lower than what we've conservatively reported, and the maximum increase in traffic level on any street will be less than 5%. In addition, surveys were conducted to demonstrate surplus in parking spaces in the vicinity of the proposed development site, with a considerable number of bays remaining unoccupied when the clinic is busiest. And that's when we did the surveys, when the clinic is proposed to be busiest. And this suggests that the surrounding area has the capacity to absorb fluctuations in demand and effectively complement the parking proposed on the site when it is busiest. Now, we acknowledge that the parking demand may differ at other times outside those that were surveyed, but that is offset by the fact that the demand for parking at this clinic will likely be lower at those times and therefore less likely to use public parking areas. So just to finish up in summary, I'd like to reiterate that the traffic impacts and the demand for parking is likely to be much lower than what we reported in our traffic impact statement. Our comprehensive technical assessment reveals no significant impacts on the surrounding road network. We are well below the range where impacts could be considered materially significant. And in addition, the public parking in the area can reasonably accommodate variations in site-based demand, just like it does now for the South Perth Hospital. I might leave it there. Thank you, panel.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Trent, your 3 minutes.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, members and councillors. Thank you for the time to present to you this morning. Method planning was not involved in the initial determination in June 2025. In undertaking initial research, we noted discussions at the previous STAT meeting into the following matters: the nexus between the design and numbers of practitioners and staff, the need for data on availability of off-site car parking bays, and the management of car parking, and the need for an operational management plan with reference to detail on clientele, drop-off bays and alternative transport use for staff. So these 3 issues have been specifically addressed in our submission for the Section 31 reconsideration. And these demonstrate a better understanding of the operation of the facility with a maximum of 15 practitioners and support staff of up to 20. Survey data from 4 days in the AM and PM timeframes to demonstrate availability of off-site parking for staff, and a site-specific operational and car parking management plan that addresses the previous issues of allocation of bays, signage, ongoing reporting and education of staff. This includes detail on previous DAP discussions and all the requests of the City of South Perth in their request for information in November 25, with the exception of the unnecessary survey request for over 30 hours of surveys. We also note that we've made no request for review of the cash and lead condition. In fact, a willingness to add the payment of 2 further bays to this should it be needed as detailed in the RAR. It is disappointing that a planning application in an inner city area comes down to a stated need to build a car park for up to 30 cars, based mainly on calculations of engineers in the 70s and 80s, creating further traffic on our roads, promoting the use of fossil fuel emitting vehicles and creating heat sinks in a city that needs more tree canopy. Furthermore, this calculation does not include modern conveniences and incentives for alternative transport use, rideshare options, or the unique operation of a dentist where people are likely to be sedated and cannot rely on their private motor vehicle. We also note that as per the non-residential car parking planning reform outcomes by DPLH, which state, and I quote, "For neighbourhood centres, continued over-provision of on-site parking would remove the opportunity to facilitate non-vehicle movements, remove the imperative on local government to manage on-street parking and not contribute to the creation of great local spaces, unquote. We have demonstrated that not only do we not need to construct 30 car bays, but that the proposed use can operate within the proposed site and current off-site supply, as well as the various measures for staff parking and alternative transport use. The project is shovel-ready, a much-needed service and facility for the local community, and we therefore ask that you endorse the alternative recommendation for approval, without including any additional conditions for further off-site studies, as this should be the remit of the council as it plans for the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll see if panel members have questions of you. Councillor Ward? No. Councillor Leeds?
Yes, thank you. Could you please explain the reallocation of the 14 on-site bays from what was originally approved?
Yeah, the key one, the key reallocation is ensuring that there's 4, is it, 1, 2, we've got
It's gone from 8 staff to 2 staff.
correct, yes. Yep, and that's because what we have done is ensured that because we can manage staff parking in a much simpler manner by staff education and knowing that there is off-site bays, so we've removed them from there, and we can manage that through that car parking management plan. And what we've ensured, we've got 4 patient 15-minute drop-off bays to manage the dropping off and picking up of patients. Yeah.
Further questions?
Yes, please do.
In terms of the survey, you said that you'd done it over 4 days. When was that done?
It was done in 2024 and 2025, so in August and in April, so in different months. They were done on different days, so Thursdays, a Saturday was done.
Yeah, I've got it here. Thursday, the 25th of August, 2024. Monday, the 28th of April, 2025. Thursday, the 29th of August, 24. 31st of August, 24. And
so most of them were done in late
28th,
2024, and there was some done in April 2025, so when the original report was done. So we did a weekend as well as 3 weekdays.
Okay.
Yeah.
And will the clinic be open on the weekend?
not at this stage, no.
And what times of the day were they done? Sorry.
They were done to coincide when we estimated the clinic would be busiest, and so it was done both in the morning around 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning, and it was also done in the afternoon around 3 and 3:15. Yeah.
Thank you. Member Arias, questions to the presenter?
Yeah, thank you for that. I want to get an understanding of the proposal we have before us is in terms of the development, doesn't appear any different. Is that correct? Built form element. What is different is the staff numbers in the same building framework. Can you explain to us the rationale for that?
Yeah, I think it probably goes back to some of the questions of DAP members at that time, you guys at that time, because the facility would appear to accommodate more than what the condition currently approves. I think there was some acknowledgement of that. I can't speak exactly why that happened at the time, but in reviewing the facility and understanding how the facility works better, we've come back to look at, firstly, does it work? And secondly, to get an amended condition to allow for more people on site because of the capacity of the facility to accommodate that level of business.
Okay. But it is a substantial change in terms of that particular issue. It's not a minor variation, it's a substantial. So your comment about the building presumably accommodates more than what's initially anticipated, is that what you're suggesting?
The building can accommodate what was initially approved. Yes, could accommodate more than what was initially approved.
Right. And having reviewed the previous decision, you would have noticed the members were concerned about car parking, and that still would seem to be the case. Can you explain whether there's a relationship, because I think the RAR suggests there is, between staff members and potential clients to the practice? Is there a correlation between the two?
Absolutely, yeah.
So there's likely to be increased patronage as a result of additional staff?
Yes,
Okay.
and yep,
And so what does that mean in terms of car parking requirement?
so, and that's, we've done a few different calculations in the updated transport impact assessment on car parking, and I don't know what the latest figure, I think was 28 or 30 car bays.
30 car bays is what we've estimated, 2 per practitioner, would be the acceptable amount, allowing for both customers, ancillary staff and the practitioners themselves on average. Noting that a lot of people actually are sedated, so they don't drive or they're dropped off. So it changes the relationship to what you would see for different types of medical clinic. But in this case, 2, and that's consistent with what DPLH has in its guidance. Yeah.
So just before you move on, could I ask a question on that very specific issue that you raised about the nature of the clients, and that as they're sedated, there is a different relationship with parking? Can you explain what you mean? Because I understand that to mean that either the car will come and park and stay for the whole duration, somebody else will park and wait for the individual, depending on the time frame of that individual at the site, or that vehicle is going to appear twice to the property. What do you mean by that comment in the context of people can't drive? What's the rationale of that response for us to take on board?
The experience is that people get dropped off either via rideshare or taxi, or they will get dropped off by a friend or relation. They will not stay, they will come back, because often these procedures are quite long, and there isn't actually accommodation for people to be waiting for appointments, but not waiting for patients. So they will get dropped off and come back.
I've got different questions. So
Okay,
thank
you. Just presiding, continue. So, so the latest traffic assessment and parking assessment is based on the potential additional patronage to the facility.
The one that was done, that was included within the package, still was based on floor areas. So basically, because the floor area didn't change, the patronage didn't change, and the estimates didn't change. But since then, we've done, I've gone away and done an assessment based on staff numbers. And because obviously the way that WPC does it based on floor areas is a fairly inflexible method. You know, it doesn't allow for variations in staff. So we went back and did a more rigorous assessment around staff numbers, and the assessment revealed then that the actual numbers would be much lower than what we previously estimated. And it indicates just when you do it on the basis of staff, it basically indicates the floor area analysis assumes a lot of staff, and so it assumes double what you would normally expect. So it's quite a blunt tool, I guess, if you can call it that. Whereas the assessment based on staff numbers gives us a much better estimate, which is a much lower estimate than what we previously reported.
Okay.
Yeah.
One final question.
Thank you.
So on that point, and I guess what the panel's being asked for is to consider car parking in it's a more sophisticated way than a traditional way that relies on floor space. I think it's not unreasonable to be clear if you've talked about controlling how staff vehicles are utilised, and the client's thing is still a bit uncertain to me. And as Member Lafante has said, I'm not quite clear about how you manage that part of it, whether you're suggesting that clients simply park on the street somewhere within the locality.
No, that's hopefully it should be clear that the maximum peak demand for clients is, I think, 12 bays. Is that what we had initially? And there's obviously 12 bays available on site to accommodate them. That was I guess the simple answer to that.
Yeah.
I'll just follow up to get that.
I think we were talking about the available public parking as an additional resource should it be required, but ultimately.
And for staff.
Yeah, the intent here was to provide for the peak demand on the site. And there was obviously the city's made some requests around cash and leave provisions.
Okay,
Could I
One-
just?
Sorry, one
Oh,
further.
Yeah.
You did make a comment about not objecting to the cash and loan condition. And I'm trying to understand why that is, given you're suggesting that the parking provided satisfies peak demand.
Because we're don't want to die in a ditch of the application for that. I absolutely
fair
would
response.
very much mount an argument as to why it's not appropriate and why it should be based on exact demand. But in this whole scheme of things, we're choosing our battles.
Okay,
really,
thank you.
quite essentially.
I'll go to Member Lafanti, then I'll come back to you, councillor Lees.
The proposal has a reduction in dedicated parking for staff and practitioners. And from the material we have here, it indicates that you're seeking for that to essentially be accommodated in the public domain. What are your specific management measures to control and manage the staff parking? The documents that I have in front of me appear to focus on the individual behaviours as opposed to any specific actions. And what I'm trying to get at is, what is the solution? Is it expecting that there will be free unlimited parking for this site in the public domain? So the management plans are very light on any specific, tangible, permanent solutions. It appears to be a general statement that staff will change their behaviour and or park in the public domain, and that will occur indefinitely for the life of the development. Can you clarify what you say are the definitive controls that will manage the parking? And the other control was in there was operation, that someone will go outside and check if people park too long in the customer parking area. So I'd like to hear from a planning perspective, it's not a traffic perspective, it's a planning perspective about these as reasonable controls for the extent of variation that is being sought for the permanent life of this development. So that's quite a large question, but it's really coming down that they were very, very light on in terms of what are actual controls.
Yep. So look, we're certainly happy to present more, I guess, practical, pragmatic, operational controls
Such as?
through a condition, such as, I mean, I talked to the client about having staff incentives for not using vehicles. Obviously having payment of parking by the dental clinic for staff, and then, you know.
So are these any agreed to? We don't have documents say that these are actual, tangible solutions.
Yep, absolutely understand that, and I would hope that we could achieve that with all the principles in place and the education of the staff to then incentivise them to do it and essentially to force them to do it, because that's part of their induction into the company. It's part of the explanation of how they get to work. It's not, I mean, I work in Leederville personally, and we have 4-car bays for an office of 35 people, and everyone understands they have to get to work in a different manner, and that is not only culturally, I guess, in some areas acceptable, but it's just part of the education of those people. There are incentives also to not use your car, and there is also some people get their car parking paid for in the public car park, and we would look at similar measures to that. And to talk about the longevity of it, I would be hesitant to try and plan for more than 5, 10, 15 years ahead. I would expect people would be very different methods of getting to work in that after that time period. So I don't know what we could secure in perpetuity. Understand that planning application does come in perpetuity, but I won't pretend I know what those solutions are after that period of time. But certainly in this shorter period or medium term, we'd be happy to address a condition that satisfies the statutory authorities to ensure that there are enough incentives or pragmatic approaches to deal with that.
And can you provide your comment about the expectation that this, and this was discussed at the previous meeting. I know I raised a question about your intensity of development and the rationale for your reduction of, and the scale of it, and there were some words provided in relation to that. But the expectation to rely on this number of public parking bays, essentially for the operation of the facility in terms of orderly and proper planning, because essentially there is an expectation that they will be provided within the public domain, and there is no, again, arrangements regarding whether or not those bays would, in the public domain, be either timed or paid for. Or so I suppose from my perspective, it's a planning question about the expectation to rely on public parking to accommodate this development. We've talked about some might use modal transport, alternate transport, but there was only 2 bays we're nominating for staff. So what's the planning rationale in the public domain for this development?
Well, the planning rationale is that there is parking available for this development in the public domain, and the planning rationale being that it is through a modal shift and also a education of staff and other methods that we could present to you would therefore save us having to, build a further bitumised car park on site that doesn't actually fit in the current design, but in the orderly and proper planning of the locality, not to provide more car parking on site when it can utilise local parking that is available, not just, and there is free untimed parking in the South Perth car park, or it's an hour, I think.
That's correct. Yeah. I mean, there's an expectation also with the provision of cash and lieu that the city will provide that public parking in that local domain as well.
Or other upgrades to transport infrastructure.
Or other upgrades to transport.
So just a comment you just made a few moments ago was it's unreasonable to expect additional parking on site. That to me sounds like an economic decision, not a planning decision.
Sorry. No, it's more an environmental decision to be building more bitumised hard stand car parking when it can be accommodated locally in a manner that we have got data to say that we can fit the parking on there. I mean, if we needed to get a better balance between what you perceive with what the car staff parking on site and patients, and whether there's bays out the front for patients, we just didn't want patients to be walking from public parking areas. We could have the opportunity to incentivise, educate and make sure the staff park in the public parking areas.
So that kind of almost leads me to another question, that if you're increasing staff parking on site, because at the moment the predominant parking is for staff and practitioners are in the street, you're then anticipating that the customers would essentially use it as a dedicated drop-off pickup area to your facility. And what I'm trying to get at is it seems that there is a reasonable reliance of exclusiveness within the parking area to accommodate the intensification you're seeking as part of these condition changes. And I'm trying to clarify that in a planning sense, because it seems that you've got a heavy reliance, and you were talking about you might be able to make some change, but that change just pushes the customers into the public domain. It seems it's kind of, it didn't seem to be a solution that takes them away from the public domain.
Yes, so I don't think, there's no question here that we need to rely on public domain car parking. And there is, I guess it's where is that level that we can hopefully get approval for, and I guess that's ultimately what we're trying to come to, if I understand it correctly. And we've taken a position that there are enough bays available to accommodate the staff, which we believe we can manage, and to minimise any impact on the drop-off and pick-up of clients or any other patients that park the whole duration of their stay. We want to accommodate them on site as best we can, because I believe that would potentially have a negative impact on the amenity of the area if we didn't do that. But I would hope that the amenity is even, you know, I know there were some comments about safety by people. I mean, if we get more people walking to bays and the like during the day, then that had a bit of element of safety on the street. They're walking through a park as well, that would not have any negative impact on the amenity of the area.
Those are my questions at this juncture.
Thank you. Back to you, councillor Lees, you had a further question.
Thank you. My question was in relation to the car parking requirements. You mentioned that the WAPC requirement is net lettable area, but my understanding was the City of South Perth requirement is net lettable, and the WAPC guidelines talk about practitioner numbers. Is that?
I was talking about trip generation in that instance and not parking generation. So that they're done on a different basis depending on whether it's traffic or parking. They're obviously interrelated. So yes, in the case of parking, it's based on floor areas. That's correct, and net lettable area is the basis that is typically used.
So did you have some comments in relation to your compliance with the WAPC guidelines?
So the DPLH have new reform guidelines that they've released, and that indicates 2 bays per practitioner. As
2 or minimum 2, maximum 4, I thought.
2, as I understand it, per practitioner, but I'm happy to be corrected. And that
minimum, yeah.
And obviously, the minimum would apply in any case. In this case, to a medical facility of this type. Because
why do you say that?
As I said before, my assessment of this facility is that, based on the surveys that have been done and so forth, and the duration of stay, and the type of user in terms of the sedation of the patients and so forth, and the intent for this to be a drop-off pickup type facility, that it would fall towards the lower end of the requirements. That's my assessment professionally. And so, but even putting that aside, you know, we've done benchmarking of parking rates across the whole city, and the City of South Perth has quite high rates relative to other equivalent municipalities, and that can be a policy decision, that's fine, but from a perspective of actual demand, we actually believe that 2 bays per practitioner is quite reasonable, quite relative to the demands in a city municipality.
And if I could just mention also, I think it's just, obviously we're talking about a medical centre land use, but the dentist is quite different in the length of appointments, and we talked about that sedation and the like as well. It's not like a normal medical centre where one GP may have 2 or 3 patients waiting and work through them in 15-minute intervals. You know, often a procedure is an hour, 2 hours, or even longer for, you know, implants and things like that, which is what they're doing here. So it's a very different, the actual operation facilities is very different to what you would normally look at for a normal medical centre.
Do you have another one?
Just one further question. You were seeking the removal of condition 8. We haven't really talked about that in terms of the parking management plan, and I'm just wanting to understand why, given you're increasing the shortfall, why you wouldn't be happy with providing parking.
No, absolutely, we're happy to. It's only because we did provide a draft one, or we did provide one, but clearly that needs to be some work, and we expect if approval was forthcoming, there would be some clear detail we need to provide in there around pragmatic approaches to.
So you'd be happy for that condition?
Absolutely, yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've got a few questions. Just to go to that last point, obviously as a planner, you know, medical centre, and therefore the matter of approval runs with a medical centre rather than the specific operational. So when we're talking about sedation, well, that's how this particular dentist operates, but that's not necessarily how a year from now, should the practice be sold on, another practitioner would operate, and they might be into, you know, the 15-20 minute checkups and so forth. So I think in a way, we have to put that aside, understand that you've got patient care in mind, and that runs with all medical practices. But if one takes this as a pure medical centre land use, how does your parking and trip analysis stack up in that sense? Let's leave aside all of those patient sedation and the way that the dentist operates things. How does it work by comparison to other centres?
I think quite simply it doesn't, but I think, I don't know how we can secure that. I might certainly have examples in other ways, but I guess the quite simple point is the whole floor plan layout changes. So it would be a whole redesign of the whole site, because if you're looking at, the rooms, the theatre rooms, I don't know how many theatre rooms a standard medical centre would have, but not the number that we have here.
Okay.
The rooms for the X-rays, the rooms for the manufacturing of the implants and all that. It's just a completely different operation.
Okay.
So it's not the whole thing, that the whole site would need to be redesigned would be the answer to that.
Okay, thank you. And just to follow up there on Councillor Lee's questioning around, you have seen the R13 and you've seen the replacement conditions and new conditions. Just for clarity's sake, could you comment specifically upon those, succinctly, but specifically upon those? Thank you.
Sorry, the new conditions.
Yes, so the R13K, or well, the alternative, if you wish, or the R13 response came through with some replacement conditions and some new conditions. That was yesterday. I presume you will have seen those.
Yes, absolutely. And I did comment before around certainly, absolutely, was very happy with the detail required for a car parking management plan in their recommendation, and then the additional condition I just question, and again, I guess I just questioned the need for us to be continuing to survey surrounding streets when that could be impacted by a number of uses in the area. But the other bullet points there really have no issue with, if that is seen as a way to ensure that we continue to comply with our approval, then we're obviously happy to do that, because that's obviously what we plan to do.
Okay, thank you. And my last question is, I think in your presentation commentary, in the written commentary, you talked about the City of South Perth's parking standards being somewhat higher than perhaps other local governments and perhaps WAPC. Could you clarify that, please, and what relative analysis you've done in that respect and how it relates to medical centre?
Sure. So over a number of years, we've looked at the different ways that parking provision is provided. So parking provision is a policy measure. It doesn't necessarily relate to demand. Often it's facilitated on a different basis. So and it varies from local government to local government. And in our benchmarking of different local governments in Perth, we've looked at the rates that have been used. And some, like Nedlands, are very, very high, and others like Vincent and that are much lower. So it turns out City of South Perth are at the higher end in terms of medical clinic provision rates. Again, these are provision rates, so they're a mechanism or policy. They're not necessarily have any relationship to demand. And in this case, what we're suggesting is that the rates are quite high relative to what other equivalent municipalities have in a city. As I say, there are others that are higher, like Netherlands. I admit that. But in this case, generally we see City of South Perth being about twice the rate of some of those ones I just mentioned, like Vincent. So consequently, the suggestion here is that it's quite high relative to what the norm is, to what DPLH actually is recommending under its current reform policy agenda, and inconsistent with many of the documents that the city actually has around sustainable transport and improving the use of public transport and more self-sufficiency. So we actually made a submission to the city as part of their review of their current scheme to encourage it to actually lower the rates to be more consistent with parking demand.
Okay, thank you for that. Are there any further questions? Member Arias?
Yeah, clarification, presiding member. Your reference to replacement condition 8 would have seen it in the R13 request. Are you saying that you would be prepared to accommodate a condition, revised condition 8 as per the R13 request? Is that what you said?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
But obviously what you've submitted is different to what has been requested by the city. So there's additional information.
Yes.
So it would have to be a revised plan.
Absolutely, and yes, dealing
Okay,
with
all
the
right,
more
just wanted to clarify.
nuances. Yep.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. If there's no, there is a fifth
Sorry,
question.
I just have one more question. I just would like to better understand why, at the time the approval went through, you were happy with the numbers or the,
And
and why the change now? I know you said you'd reviewed the operational, but it was suggested at the time that those numbers were acceptable and they were your application at the time, so I'm just not clear on why.
I believe it was it wasn't myself dealing with it at the time or my firm, but I believe in speaking to the client, it was a miscommunication at the time between the consultant at the time and the owner. I believe there was and maybe the city can maybe enlighten a bit further, but I believe there was a lot of toing and froing around that particular issue, and it may have been some miscommunication at the time.
All right, thank you. We'll let you go and we will call up the city officers. We have Brianna Murphy, Scott Van Ireland and Fiona Mullen. Assume their places. Brianna, did you want to come and sit up? Are you happy there?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, all right, thank you. Scott and Fiona, having heard the Q&A there, were there any comments that you want to make in relation to that? Obviously, we have read your responsible authority report, or are you happy to go straight to questions?
Thank you to the chair. I would like to make a very short opening statement, and then we would like to comment on some of the technical aspects of the proposal and the responses that were provided by the applicant.
Yeah.
Thank you. So the review seeks to amend condition 4, which is increasing staff and practitioner numbers, and condition 8, which is to replace the parking management plan with operational management plan. The original condition 4 reflected what was applied for and assessed, and there was a total of 10 practitioners and 21 total staff numbers. This ensured the development aligned with assessed parking shortfall and the reliance on public parking could be accommodated. The proposed changes represent a significant intensification. Practitioners have now gone from 10 to 15 and the overall staff numbers from 21 to 45, with corresponding increase in patients and on-site activity. This materially alters the scale and operational characteristics of the approved development. The review is not correcting or amending a condition, but effectively seeking to expand the approved development beyond what was assessed and importantly applied for. The city's understanding is that mediation was vacated and documents were submitted in lieu of mediation. The city was not invited to attend mediation. SAP consideration, in the city's opinion, is not intended to facilitate substantive changes to development intensity or scope beyond what was applied for, and the scale of changes raises doubt in the city's mind as to whether it is appropriate via condition review and section 31 reconsideration, and suggests a more appropriate avenue would have been a formal amendment to adapt Form 2 or a new development application to Form 1. Scott will provide additional comments in relation to traffic and parking. However, I would just like to comment on the last question that was raised in terms of a miscommunication with the city. The city is of the opinion there was no miscommunication. We have an email from the
Sorry,
applicant.
Fiona, I think it meant the miscommunication between the consultant and the client, perhaps,
Right,
whether you
okay.
were aware of any of that. I don't
Right.
think it was
Okay,
suggesting
right.
any
Thank you.
miscommunication by the city.
Well, I would say the city's understanding is that the applicant communicated with the proposed user of the site and that they were city's understanding aware and they did attend the DAP meeting previously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and through the chair. To build on Fiona's comments, I just have some technical information relating to the car parking assessment and how the city has conducted its assessment in relation to the ratio. So as part of the original development application, the car parking rates as identified in the city's local planning policy, non-residential car parking, were considered, and the city, in consultation with the applicants and their representatives at the time, were presented with an alternative calculation that was site-specific based upon the land use for the car parking ratio. So the city's local planning policy ties the car parking ratio to the net lettable area of the site. The applicant proposed at the time an alternative method for calculating parking demand, and that was based upon staff numbers and client numbers. So using the information from the that was accepted by the city as an alternative way to determine the site-specific parking demand based upon this land use in this location. So as part of the original application, noting there was 10 practitioners and a total of 21 staff, the applicant's TIS talks about a mild overlap between the number of clientele attending the site based upon the land use. They've nominated a ratio of approximately 1.5 clients per practitioner in terms of car parking demand. So on that basis, if we go through the car parking rates, feel free to interrupt or if you've got any questions, but the original patient demand for car parking based upon 10 staff was 15 patient bays. So the 10 staff times 1.5, 15 bays. Based upon the applicant's TIS again, they've nominated that approximately 70% of staff are expected to attend site by vehicle. So based upon 21 staff, that was 15 bays. So the total car parking demand based upon that was 30 bays at the time, originally based upon the applicant's TIS. The revised amended proposal with the staff numbers, having 45 staff on site results in a demand for 23 patient bays on that 1.5 ratio, and 32 staff bays based upon 0.75 times the number of staff, which results in an overall parking demand of 55 bays for the site. So if we look at the number of bays provided on site, being 14, the original car parking shortfall was 16 bays, and the city came to the conclusion that 16 bays, based upon the evidence and information submitted by the applicant, could be accommodated in the adjoining public parking based upon the availability audit that they submitted. The current shortfall, based upon the proposed amendment and the applicant's information in the TIS, represents a 41 bay car parking shortfall. The city is not satisfied with the information that's been presented, that this can reasonably be accommodated in the adjoining street and public parking domain.
Scott, could I just ask, have you done that calculation purely on the City of South Perth parking standards? Have you also done it on the basis of the WAPC policy with the recommendation for minimum maximum?
The numbers I've just given you are actually based upon the ratios specified within the applicant's traffic impact statement.
Okay.
They're not relative to the city's local planning policy. The city accepted that the site-specific rates based upon those ratios were an appropriate measure to determine the car parking demand for this site. Building on some of the commentary from the previous, from the applicants and some of the questions from DAP, the WIPC guidelines, if we're looking for a medical centre within a local centre zone, a minimum 2 bays per practitioner, a maximum 4 bays per practitioner.
And they've gone for 1.5.
And so that's overall for the site.
Yeah.
It doesn't have regard to patients. It purely ties parking demand to the number of practitioners on site. It doesn't have regard to other staff for this.
Can I just ask, sorry, how would you normally determine whether you use the minimum or the maximum or something in between?
In terms of determining the minimum maximum, it's very site dependent in terms of the land use that they're proposed. Broadly speaking, I think it's widely acknowledged that car parking minimums and car parking standards are a starting point. I think it's widely acknowledged, especially in planning, that a much better methodology to assess car parking demand for a site is a site-specific parking review and then parking demand assessment for the site. So in my experience, a policy position regarding car parking is a starting point as to this is what is indicated to be on site to minimise the amenity impact for adjoining land users and accommodate appropriate parking on site. It's up to the applicant and the opportunity at that time to present an alternative parking demand based upon their site-specific needs and their constraints, and it's up to the planning assessment to consider that and deem it appropriate or not for the site based upon the site's constraints and any management plan or operational characteristics specific to the land use that they've applied for.
Did you want to follow up?
Well, yes, I noted the presiding member's comments about the consulting room. Medical centre approval being issued here, and while the applicant is talking about 1.5 clients per practitioner, would you expect that to be a standard requirement for a medical centre, or is that specifically based on it being a dental clinic?
So the 1.5 standard that they put forward here, it is very specific to the land use that they have applied for.
The dental clinic?
The dental clinic, and it is directly tied to how they see the centre that they have designed and applied for operating. I couldn't really comment on terms of the overall demand in terms of how it would work if a medical centre was proposed. I do know in my personal experience going through a dental surgery myself and being sedated, and that sort of stuff, I did have appointments with the dental technician and the dental surgeon before I actually went under. So I did have, I think, about 3 attending prior to the actual surgery itself. So I do know there would possibly be an overlap in terms of the consultation from a medical centre versus a dental surgery.
Could I just open, please? I'll go back to panel members, but I think we requested the R13 because the way that the original RAR was written was to recommend a refusal, whereas I think, Fiona, you opened by saying, well, we've been tasked with a review by SAT of specific conditions given the changes that wish to be made. Hence, the R13 was seeking clarity around exactly what you were recommending. I think you were recommending a refusal of the applicant's request to amend conditions 4 and well, then whatever followed. But that's not the way it was originally written. So could I just ask you, your clarity provided, thank you for that, through the R13. Given your recommendation, how would you propose, should the panel wish to take your recommendation first as we run through that order?
Yes.
How would you propose that preamble should actually work? If you could just run us through that so we're all on the same page, because it is a little confusing at the moment.
Thank you. Yes, through the chair. It's confusing for the city as well, to be honest. So yes, and it's a slightly strange situation because, as I said, we've not dealt with an amendment of such a nature before to a condition. So it would be, I hope this is correct in terms of the legislation, it would be to affirm its decision of the initial DAP decision. So it's not to support the requested amendment to the condition.
Right, so it's technically, it's not a refusal as you
That's
wrote,
correct,
but it is
yes.
affirming the first decision. And
I
then,
apologise for that.
not at all, not at all. We're happy you're able to explain that. And then in terms of you, on balance, provided some alternates, a preamble for that would be to affirm the previous decision, but to vary then should there be other condition changes that the panel wish to make. So they're two quite separate decisions in one respect.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for that. That was all I just wanted to open to get us all clarity. Now, panel members, are there other questions that you have of the city staff? Councillor Ward, did you have any questions of city staff?
No, I don't think you.
Councillor Lees, no more? Member Arias?
Yes, thank you. If you could please, for my benefit, just run through your estimates of shortfall. Sorry, but perhaps starting with, so we're all clear, the proposed parking, the parking that's proposed, and your estimate of shortfall. If you could do that, please.
Yes, certainly.
Yeah.
Thank you through the chair. So I'll start with the parking provision on site that's been nominated by the applicant as part of the current proposal before MIDAP today. So the current proposal in terms of the car parking breakdown is 2 practitioner bays, 5 patient bays, 5 15-minute bays for patients, 1 pick-up and drop-off bay, 1 aquad bay, and 1 bay which is in fact a turnaround bay for vehicle manoeuvring in case someone enters the car parking, can't find a bay, needs to exit or manoeuvring effectively. So there was a total of 14 bays provided on site, 2 for practitioners, 1 aquad, and the balance for patients. So a mixture of 15-minute bays and full-time unrestricted bays.
So, and if I wrote down earlier, you said that the shortfall, and I presume that's based on the DPLH calculation, is 16 shortfall?
Thank you, through the chair. The shortfall of the current approved DAP.
Yes.
So not the substantive. Yeah. So the current approval is 16 bay shortfall. That's not per the Western Australian Planning Commission's guidelines or the city's local planning policy. That is based upon the ratio has been nominated by the applicant in their traffic impact statement for this exact development on this site, which has been accepted by the city as an acceptable ratio for the assessment of this site.
Okay, and then the current shortfall takes you to 41.
The current shortfall using that same ratio nominated by the applicant is 41 bays.
That then leads us to a question. So what are the implications of the shortfall and your analysis of the surveys of availability of public spaces, your analysis of the way in which parking could be managed and travel could be managed? Do you have a comment on the implications of that shortfall within the immediate area, just for clarity's sake?
So thank you again, through the chair. So a couple of impacts in terms of the shortfall. Predominantly the shortfall is resulting from staff car parking. It's not, so I think it's important to have a distinction between the available staff parking and the availability of parking for clientele visiting the site. So as the shortfall predominantly relates to staff parking, it's expected that staff parking are going to occupy a bay for a significantly longer period of time than, say, a patient attending the site. So the turnaround of the public car parking bays is likely to be not particularly high. It's expected that they'll work a standard sort of shift and without any other alternative information provided in terms of if they're 3-hour shifts or 2-hour shifts or 1-hour shifts in terms of the staff parking. We've assumed a full day of parking would need to be accommodated. So effectively, you're blocking out public car parking for almost in all business hours. Through the submissions and the city's own observations, there is a large car parking demand in this area. I know some of the submissions are clearly saying there's already a significant car parking shortfall in this area. We're already struggling to find public bays to service our businesses and whatnot in the area. The city's concern is that if should this go through, those bays are going to be occupied for longer periods of time.
Scott, could I just stop you there? The applicant has done parking surveys which demonstrate, contrary to that perception of the submissions, that there is availability of public parking. What's the city's own analysis of public parking availability and how current is that analysis?
So if I can probably break that response to two. The peak, so the applicant as well and has talked about the city's request originally for a larger parking availability survey to determine appropriate availability. For this type of land use, noting the staff bays are long-term bays that need to be accommodated, it's sort of inappropriate to say we're going to pick this time and this time and this time and say, look, at this time it's free, at this time it's free, and noting one of those days was for weekend, which is not relevant to this site as the development's not proposed to operate on a weekend. So we don't believe the adequacy of the car parking survey that's been done is appropriate in support of the land use that we proposed. In terms of the city's own view of that, unfortunately we don't have any monitoring of these public bays at the time being. There isn't parking meters and whatnot, as the applicants also said, some restricted parking in large areas of this location, so we do not have that data. So what we're going on in terms of this is the city's own observations and knowledge of the locality in terms of the available car parking and the submitters' comments on this application and the previous application talking about those deficiencies in parking availability. We did request a larger car parking audit that demonstrated continuous car park supply between the operational hours of this development. That request was rejected and the applicants provided reasonings to why that request was rejected.
Member Harris?
Um,
Or Member
yeah,
Lafente?
no, thank you. I do have a question.
Okay.
Obviously, when the panel approved this application, car parking was central to the issue. I think the actual built form was satisfactory. The panel's view was there was a shortfall and that was acceptable, provided cash in lieu was provided. And it was not a substantial number of bays, 38 bays. You heard earlier the applicants is prepared to provide additional cash in lieu, is prepared to agree to that. What is the view of the city officers in terms of dealing with deficiency in that manner?
I think it was 2 bays. Did you say 3 or 2?
Sorry?
How many bays did you say?
2?
2, sorry, I
Yeah.
misheard you.
Thank you, through the chair. I did hear too. Thank you. Sorry, I was contradicted. The city took account previously of what they considered to be an acceptable or a shortfall that could be accommodated within the area, and that the payment of a cash in lieu for those parking bays could be used. It's not localised. The amount would not be used in local context, but it would be used in the wider city context, and that could be accommodated. The issue with the current application is the shortfall becomes so significant that a cash in lieu payment is really not going to address the shortfall that we're facing with the current proposal. And I think the other point to consider is the city did previously acknowledge, and I think a question was asked by the panel as to, well, would the city consider increasing numbers? I know it was a point that was made at the time of the previous DAP, and the city were prepared at that point to monitor how that shortfall was working. So the city was obviously acknowledged there was a shortfall, that there would be an impact on the local area, but was willing to work with the applicant to see how that shortfall would work, whether it could accommodate additional practitioners, and at some future date a further application would be made too. But that was based on a real-time assessment of a shortfall. So really I think it's that shortfall that was accepted, and yes, it wasn't an insubstantial amount, there was a cash in lieu payment, could be accommodated for that period whilst the city assessed the future demand and the demand that this use would generate in the area.
Okay, but do you want to
Yeah.
continue? So from the city perspective, any further is, from a planning perspective, perhaps unreasonable, without putting words in your mouth.
Thank you, through the chair. Yes, that's the city's position.
Thank you.
Thank you. Member Lafente, any questions?
Yes, I have similar questions essentially that I had to the applicant. The material that we have here, in terms of the proposal, my understanding is seeking reliance on the council provided free untimed parking. Are there any formal arrangements that would secure that parking for the longevity of the site in the context of the number of parking bays or lack thereof parking on site, and therefore the corresponding number of staff that may want to use those bays? Is there any arrangements that the city has for dedicated parking within the public parking area? Because these are thought, as I understand, to be reasonably long term. They're not drop in 5 minutes and go like a shop or something. What's the arrangements there?
Thank you, through the chair. No, there is no provision for spaces within a public car parking area to be allocated to a private user, and I couldn't foresee the city supporting such a proposal.
If I may also say, through the chair, as part of the city's parking strategy, and cash in lieu payments.
Sorry, just a fraction louder.
We've got this air conditioning thing going on behind us here, so.
As part of the city's car parking strategy and the use of payment for cash in lieu, part of the city's key strategy is increasing the turnover of available public parking bays.
So timing, having time limit
So having
controls.
timing bays and installing paid parking meters and whatnot, that's one of the key objectives of part of the city's parking strategy, noting that it's unlikely the city is going to be creating new public parking bays or new large scale parking facilities based upon land availability and higher and best use of that land. It's likely that that money that is, or any money that is provided as a cash in lieu payment, will be dedicated to increase the turnaround and availability of the current public parking rather than creating new long-term parking spaces.
And my second question, again, is very similar but slightly different in this context, is that the documentation that are attached to the agenda about the controls on that support a parking management plan / operational management plan. Can you speak to those, or your comment on those? And my earlier comment was that my read of those appears to be voluntary personal changes with no specific controls or specific policing / management. What is your understanding and what's your position on the suitability of the plans to manage a public domain parking of the scale that is being sought in this modification?
The proposal that they put forward in terms of the management of staff, the city is in agreement. It does appear to be a voluntary. It almost seems like here's an information sheet. There's not available parking. You need to make an alternative arrangement. That seems about as far as that goes based upon the documentation that's currently provided. The city doesn't accept that as a solution in this case for this site due to the sheer volume of long-term public parking bays that are required. It seems to direct individuals to certain parking areas directly for public parking, which there's no control over their availability or not. Noting, for example, one of the key considerations the city had was the South Perth Hospital and shift changes, and there's a large volume of parking that comes in as they have the overlap between shift workers for those sort of parking arrangements. So the long and short of it is we don't believe the management practice that they've put in place for the management of public parking for staff is acceptable.
But that's fine. I haven't any other questions at this juncture.
Okay, are there any further questions of the officers before we move to the item? Okay, we'll let you go. Thank you. All right, so turning to our agenda now, we have a responsible authority report. And what I'm proposing is we'll take it in the order that we've got, the one that was in the published responsible authority report, but with some amendment to the wording in the preamble, given the officer's consideration and recommendation to us to make it better aligned. So rather than the words refuse the reconsideration of, we would replace those words with reconsider its decision dated 17th of June 2025 and affirm its decision for. Those are the replacement words that I believe are necessary in that as a substantive motion. So what I'm seeking therefore with that inclusive change is a mover and a seconder for the responsible authority recommendation in the RAR. Moved by Councillor Lees. Is there a seconder, please, for that? Member Lafanti seconds. Okay. Councillor Lees, would you like to speak to the substantive motion, please?
Yes, thank you. So I've listened to the deputations and I appreciate the information provided. but I agree with the city's concerns regarding the changes to conditions 4 and 8 and the dealing with them in this manner. So proposed change to condition 4 is a material alteration to the proposal in my mind. It would significantly increase the operational intensity of the approved medical centre. And from this point of view, it's important to recall the progression of the application. So the original proposal sought 30 staff when it was submitted originally with 19 practitioners. Then it was reduced by the applicant to 21 staff, including 10 practitioners, in order to assess concerns with traffic, parking and amenity. So the development was approved on that basis, on that reduced basis. And I note that it appears that there may have been some confusion, but from the DAP's consideration, that was what they were approving. So now, after approval has been granted on those terms, the applicant is seeking 48 staff, including 15 practitioners, which to me is a very substantial uplift. This represents more than double the approved staff numbers and a 50% increase in practitioners. It's entirely reasonable to expect that such an increase would lead to higher patient volumes, greater parking demand and additional vehicle movements, particularly when we're considering this as a medical centre generally. And I note that the applicant's comments in relation to a dental clinic, but I think we have to have a broader consideration. So it's important to acknowledge that the development already carries a 38-bay shortfall under the local planning policy requirements. And then we've got three ways of determining this. We've got the WAPC guidelines as well, but also what the applicant has proposed as a site-specific metric. And on the basis of that, the shortfall was 16 bays and it's now 41 bays. So that's quite concerning to me. It's also worth noting that the local planning policy requirements were updated or reviewed in 2024. So it's a fairly recent change and adopted by the council at that point. So in any case, if we're looking at a 41 bay shortfall, the shortfall that was accepted at the time was only accepted because the operational scale was capped and because conditions were imposed to manage the impacts. So I don't believe the applicant has now demonstrated that there are adequate parking facilities in the vicinity to absorb the additional demand now proposed. My understanding from the report and from the discussion today is that the reliance is pretty much entirely on the South Perth Hospital car park, the Birch Street car park. And it has only 28 available bays at peak based on the details in the traffic impact statement, while the demand would require 29 off-site bays, although that's open to discussion. We're talking about 41 bay shortfall again, I note. So on the applicant's own numbers, the demand exceeds supply. But like the city, I have concerns about the reliability of the survey done on the Birch Street car park that underpins the traffic impact statement. It indicates the survey was based on only 4 occasions, including 2024 and a weekend, which is not relevant. It can be seen, from my point of view, not to be a reasonable sample reflective of operational hours of the centre and the current situation in 2026. So earlier this week at approximately 1 p.m, I visited the Birch Street car park and there were no available bays at that time and several drivers were circling, waiting for spaces to become vacant. So I acknowledge that this is only a one-off anecdotal observation, but it does raise legitimate questions for me about the validity of the survey and whether the parking environment has changed since the applicant collected its data. I accept the applicant's comments about the desirability of moving away from private car use to public and active transport. In an ideal world, we would all be doing that. now, immediately, but I don't believe this is a practical option at the moment, particularly in this location. But I do acknowledge that it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation. The community's response reinforces these concerns for me. 8 objections were received, raising issues about traffic and parking pressure. And this indicates to me that there are also already issues in the area, and the proposed increase is neither minor or manageable from my point of view. I did watch the recording of the DAP meeting when the application was originally approved, and at that time the planning consultant, and acknowledging that planning consultant was no longer here, but he stated that the number of staff proposed under the condition worked for the client and was commercially viable. So in this regard, I acknowledge the city's advice that condition reflects exactly what the applicant applied for at that time, and seeking a substantial variation so soon after approval has been granted does, in my view, raise some concerns about the intent. It's also worth noting that the applicant is now proposing to reduce on-site staff parking. I understand there is reasons for that, but it further creates an exacerbation of the parking concerns for me. So in terms of condition 8, requiring a parking management plan remains essential to me. We listened to concerns about the inadequacy of current proposals. The condition was imposed specifically to help manage the previously approved parking shortfall. With the increased staff numbers now sought, to me the importance of a robust and enforceable parking management plan is heightened, not reduced. So removing or weakening this condition would undermine one of the key mechanisms intended to manage the development's impact. So in conclusion, taken together, the scale of the proposed operational increase, the 38 bay shortfall or the 41 bay shortfall, the unresolved parking concerns, including questions about the adequacy of the parking survey, and the 8 objections received, I support the city's conclusion, and that this proposal goes beyond what can reasonably be considered a minor amendment. It would materially alter the intensity of the approved land use, and for these reasons I support the recommendation by the city that the development approval issued last year with conditions 4 and 8 be affirmed. And I have concerns about this being dealt with as a Form 2 in this manner, given the increase in intensity. I think if the applicant really chooses to pursue this, then a more appropriate time from a community viewpoint would be when the dental clinic is actually operational and clear and justified evidence is available. So I will be supporting the officer advice on that basis.
Thank you, Councillor Lees. As seconder, Member LaFontaine, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you. From my perspective, I have quite significant concerns regarding the calculation of parking, the intensity of development. There's been a lot of discussion today and through the material about these differing methods of parking calculation, and it appears that even through today's discussion there's been movement back and forth between what that calculation is and how it's approached on the site. Initially site-specific, then a conversation around floor area, and from my perspective this moving framework has been created some interesting considerations. Whilst I support some level of parking within the public domain, I just do not support from a planning perspective the scale of parking that is sought to be exclusively provided within the public domain, and for the staff and practitioners of the site, those that are regularly spending long-term amount of time on the site on a regular basis. With only 2 dedicated on-site bays, it is, in my view, completely inadequate. And I also note that the expectation would be, in terms of managing it, to provide information to the staff in terms of the parking management plan about alternate modes of transport and where they can park within the public domain. From my perspective, the parking management plan is not adequate at all in controlling parking in a manner that does not impact the surrounding area or is overly reliant and more akin to exclusive use by this development in order to enable this development at its intensity being sought to work. So it relies very heavily on long-term parking within the public domain. As I've already indicated, the suggestions include education, modal transit change, a manual checking of staff to ensure that there is no congestion or intervention within the parking area. And to me, those are insufficient, and they are non-permanent arrangements that may be that control and legally bind the appropriate methods of managing a significant shortfall. It effectively, from my perspective, is pushing into the public domain and leaving it for the city or others to manage. And I haven't seen in the documents a sufficient addressing of that. I note there has been some cash in lieu. I accept the comments provided by city officers regarding cash in lieu, the application of that and where it would go, and also the intensity of the parking within that domain. From my perspective, this is quite a significant change. It is an intensification. It is a substantial demand in the public domain, and it is not supported from my perspective from the planning justification that's been provided. I note that an earlier comment about the justification was that it would be incongruent for the building addition to be provided in this prime location. That to me, whilst the applicant indicated it was environmental, sounds very much also a strong correlation to a more economic consideration and not a planning reason in terms of the demands for parking that development is being sought to be changed under this arrangement. So for those reasons, I can't support the proposal and modifications as requested in this modification.
Thank you, Member Lafanti. Others more? Member Arias?
Yeah, thank you, Presiding Member. Ordinarily, I would support a reduction in car parking. I think as a general premise, the standards being applied are historical standards that don't recognise the community's desire to have less hard stand and shift in transport modes. So generally I would support it. Having said that, when we last considered this proposal, there was strong concerns about the scale and intensity of the development in relation to car parking, and the consequence of that was two conditions, probably three conditions that the panel thought would assist. The car parking requirement directly relates to the scale of the development and the intensity, and what we're being asked to reconsider today is a greater intensity, and heard that from the applicant and the city, and potential increase in patronage of the site, but no adjustment, no meaningful adjustment to the car parking requirement. I endorse Member Lafanti's comments about having an impact on the local community, and the issue of amenity probably hasn't been addressed sufficiently from my perspective to move down a path where we might consider a greater reduction. I think that needs to be addressed much more comprehensively in order to be in a position where I would support that. So on that basis, I would support the motion to reaffirm previous position.
Thank you. I'll briefly speak. I think we do have to bear in mind it is a SAT review. We're not dealing with Form 2s or Form 1s, much as we might prefer to deal with them in a more holistic manner. We are simply looking at those matters for review. I actually think mediation might have been helpful. I'm not sure of the circumstances under which it wasn't followed through or it was vacated, but nonetheless, I think sometimes those discussions can be quite helpful to all parties to reach a point of meeting of minds, as it were. This is quite a significant intensification from where we were last time we discussed it, and there was considerable time spent on trying to resolve the matter of what level of patronage and what level of staff would be here, given the large floor plate of the area. But at this point, I think we are considering quite a significant intensification. I do understand the demand analysis. It is the similar methodology as to what we saw previously, and certainly that demand analysis is supported by the city, the ratios, etc. So at that point, everybody's agreed. The question is, what is the impact of that potential shortfall based on the applicants' ratios and those agreed ratios? Now, I think it's quite reasonable and envisaged in accordance with a lot of the city's planning framework that we move to a more sustainable, environmentally sensitive point where we're not solely focused on private car travel patterns, and that we do seek to reduce parking demand, and that there is certainly reciprocity in centres. So it follows, I think, that this level of intensification could be supported and could be acceptable. My issue is really on the evidence that's presented about the availability of that public parking for the purpose of that reciprocity and the distribution, particularly of staff and those waiting for patients who have longer term appointments, to sort of adequately operate this proposal. I think if there was more evidence available and confirmed, given the practices that are going to go on here, the hours of operation, how long staff would be remaining in situ, what the availability is through that course of the day, how that works within a reasonable walking approach, then it might be that we could take on board this level of intensity at this point. However, I have to say, I'm not across that line. I think the development's fine. I support the level of intensification, provided that there is sufficient evidence that off-site parking and the methodology associated with managing that operational management can be confirmed and is adequate. So at this point, I'm quite comfortable to reaffirm the previous decision. Councillor Ward, did you wish to take an opportunity to speak?
Look, I won't say a whole lot. I just really want to say that I very much appreciate what you've said, presiding member, and I wholeheartedly agree with what you said. I can see, although it's not a matter that's been raised, there is a need in the community, and it is consistent with the surrounding development, particularly the hospital nearby. It is obviously located on South Terrace as well, which is a public transport route. I can see the issues with the parking framework that we have in the city, and I know that it's quite dated. I know that parking is a particularly hot issue in our community, and I go past this particular location every day, sometimes several times, and I have seen the need in the community fluctuate. But I think ultimately your comments, presiding member, encapsulate my concerns and where I'm at. This is a particularly difficult one for me.
Thank you very much. Back to the mover then, to councillor Lees to have the right to reply and close debate.
I won't say too much. I acknowledge everybody's comments, and I think they're all very valid. From summing up point of view, the proposal, when it was approved, involved a significant shortfall of parking that it was accepted could be managed, but I think the intensification that is proposed here and the reliance on local public car parking that we're not clear is going to be available in terms of the numbers that we're talking about is a major concern, and so I believe that the office recommendation is appropriate, and we should reaffirm the conditions.
Thank you very much. The debate is closed. Let's put this motion to the vote. All those in favour? That's a unanimous decision. Thank you. Just quickly closing out our agenda, then in terms of other business, any other SAT applications for the DAPs are available on the DAP website. There's no further business, so I'd like to thank councillors Moore and Lees, the other panel members, officers from the city for coming in and assisting us, the presenters and the secretariat. It's running smoothly, and close at 11:28 AM. Thank you. Thank you.